And so before we jump in here, so that's the committee, and everyone has worked together to do this, and so everyone's going to jump in as parts of this event. Bishop, I saw you walk in. Do you have anything you want to say?
Full support.
Okay.
Sorry, I relate.
Told you.
Full support. That's what both your counselors said. Something about full support, and I don't want to go up there. So whenever we do something like that, this is the nerdiest meeting we could ever have, right? This is such a nerdy meeting, and I'm really excited about it, which makes me a big nerd. But it's not something that I would have been excited about a few months ago. Whenever you start something like this, the first thing you do, right, is to try to motivate everyone to do whatever we're about to talk about, right? Inspirational speaking. And so as I start this out, like so I'm a federal attorney, and the stuff I see, the stuff I do day to day is the Colorado River, and we're in a shortage we're past the line on Lake Mead and the Colorado River we've never passed before. I could spend a half an hour just talking about some interesting things out there temporally in the world, events that are going on, things about like global predictions about what could happen in 2022 with food. Talk about grain shortages and people slaughtering animals because there's not enough grain and where that could go. And we could talk for a long time about that. And I even thought about saying some of the experience, some of the things I've seen directly, and going into some details, statistics and things. But I just don't. Every time I did it, it just felt empty. It felt like a waste of time. That's not going to motivate us. Just motivate us, right? Just like fear doesn't motivate us in the long run to real sustained effort. And so the thing I can tell you as we begin this nerdy meeting is that the thing that motivated me was I went through a bunch of COVID months, and I continued to be my normal self of something falls apart, I'm going to the mountains. I've said this to some of you before. I'm a survivalist, right? I'm an outdoor adventurer. I was like, I have no problems. It's going to be just fine. And then about wintertime, December, just started feeling real direct and unique, like not the way I normally think, kind of promptings about things that I need to do for my family to prepare food storage stuff. Really, boring, nerdy food storage instead of like fishing and tanning meat in the mountains. And just specific things kind of going along over the next couple months. And then Bishop had the audacity to call me and ask me to participate in our already great emergency preparedness committee. And we talked about things, and the committee talked about things, and the work council talked about things. And there's so many little things that happened through that process. But what I feel most important was that I believe that we were prompted to come up with this little plan that is the 6-month focus. And it was to try to break down what can be very daunting, overwhelming when you think of emergency preparedness, especially when you start getting into fuel and you get into clothing and all the different ends that goes to. It's extremely overwhelming. But the approach was to take it a bit at a time. And this month to just put blinders on and just talk about food and invite everyone to just think about what you could do to get yourself in a better spot with food. And even that can be financially overwhelming or just logistically overwhelming. And so the goal tonight is to talk through ways that it can be inexpensive, if you want it to be that way, or at least it can be methodical, straightforward, clear, if that's your hang-up. If it's just the logistical nightmare of, well, I don't know how much, I don't know what to get. And so we started out already, right, with the inventory, and I know of over 30 households in the neighborhood who have gotten an inventory, and I think that's great. And if you haven't gotten an inventory yet, there's a sign-up sheet here that we can help you with it in the committee. And there's another one that a company that does it based on caloric intake can help you for free they can get you that. And so that's kind of the looking back part. But before we jump in and we start talking about like each of these different categories of food and give you some suggestions for specific products that you could go look at, the wrap up of the purpose part is that I really believe that that the driving purpose, the thing that will actually carry you through this and will motivate you to do it for yourself, for your family, and then to look outward after you have your oxygen mask on, to put it on your neighbor, put it on those that live by you, who you love, who you're responsible for, family members, is to ask if there's something you should do. And this is the little sermon part of this, and we'll get into the nerdy, technical part of this, but if you ask Heavenly Father, there's something that you should do to prepare in ways that you haven't already. I feel confident because I experienced it myself, that if you do that, you'll be guided to whatever it is. And our goal here is just to get you here, and now you have a notepad, you have a pencil, and I just would encourage you to write down anything you feel like that's something I should do, that I feel like I should do that. And I promise you, if you do that, you'll be in a better spot than you are right now, and ultimately I think you'll learn how to work with the Heavenly Father better, and you'll learn how to receive personal revelation better, which I think is the more important part of this in the end. I always think of the experiences of like painting blood on a door, looking to a brass serpent, and like these silly little tasks that were demonstrating that people were looking towards Christ. And I think that this is another maybe silly little task that really could be accomplished in just providing these things to us. But when things get rough, when the world goes further south, I think that it we've been counseled to prepare. And so I don't think that we're going to have necessarily manna when we've been counseled to do things and we didn't do it. So, all right, that's that part. Okay, so moving forward into some of the great stuff that everyone's put together. As we look at food in particular here, we're going to go through these different categories, but first, just trying to determine what you need, right, is the trick. We talked about the inventory. There's kind of 3 different ways you can approach what you need. One of them is the caloric intake approach you mentioned, and that's way out of my league. I mean, there's what Joseph has done, who's been in the neighborhood. A lot of you know him because he's been doing this with Prep 7. That's one of his signups. He goes through and he's created an app that is based on a Harvard study of caloric intake, and you put in there what you have, and it spits out what you need, which is great. The other method is servings method, which can be great because a lot of things show servings, but it can also be tricky because if you look at what the serving size is, like for example on one of these number 10 cans of green beans, this one says it's a 1/4 cup. Well, there's another company that says it's a 1/2 cup. And so like when you're trying to calibrate that, there's disparity with that, how that shakes out. And the church has really spoken to just weight. And Jackie's going to talk about that weight approach and kind of what you see basically on these little handouts is a very simplified version of like the bare minimum that the church has kind of spoken to before in terms of how you could use weight to calculate the time.
Matt, I know you didn't want to take the fear-mongering approach, but for those who need some motivation as a call to action, what would you say? I know the Spirit has to teach each one of us, and I want to be converted. I'm just not there yet, So, like, what is 1 year still the guideline? I know in the 70s it was. Is it still? And like, what else can kind of get us excited about 1 year supply?
Consider it the solar power of your home for a year.
So you have 2 handouts, I think.
Yes.
One of them is quotes from prophets, right? And the other one is kind of a bare bones thing. Oh, there's another handout. Did everyone hear me?
They might not.
Use the mic.
I know that phone and it'll pick me up. I promise. Okay, so this is another thing to look at. So yesterday, some of you heard me like be really, really direct about what our current prophet has said. And one of the things that he said was, I urge you, in fact, I'm going to take one of them myself, because Alex wants to be scared.
You need to share it and the stick. Because you heard him talk about spiritual preparation, of like a footnote.
Yeah, Alex, the only thing I remember in the scriptures about it is try not to be pregnant when it happens. That's the only thing I remember reading. I was like, I'm gonna make sure I'm not
You're
pregnant.
good.
He said that the days ahead will not be easy, but the future will be glorious for those who are prepared. After having talked about both temporal and spiritual preparation, and then he said to be instruments in the Lord's hands, who are prepared to be instruments in the Lord's hands. And we went through a lot in that second hour. We talked about like kind of what is happening, an obligation that we have to recognize the signs of the times, an obligation we have to look forward to coming to our Savior. But in the end, rather than dive too far to that right now, this is the invitation that I would give you, is to ask, do I need to do something more than I'm doing? And for me, I got clear answers when I did it. To me, that's his. I always have thought of the brother of Jared for the last 6 months. He's been in my head all the time. He was assigned to do some temporal tasks, right? And he went with several questions that he didn't know how to accomplish them, and probably needed motivation to go get on a boat and go across the ocean to who knows where. And he asked and he received, and fulfilling a temporal assignment led him to the presence of the Savior in the end. And for me, it has been very clear what I'm supposed to do, and I have always felt through this that we're going to go through each of these categories real quick here, but there is not a prescribed thing that's right for anyone. If you leave this room and nothing stands out to you, and you go home and you say a prayer about it, you say, is there anything I should do, and nothing stands out to you, then I think you've done what you should do. But I don't think that'll happen, and it wasn't that way for me. And for me, the last 6 months have been like, I'm usually fishing almost every week. Some of you know this, right? I'm usually out chasing animals almost every week. I haven't hardly done that for the last 6 months. I'm going to go back to that. This is not a way of life for me. This is an event. But it has been very clear to me that there are things that I need to do. And it's one of the main things that President Nelson has told us is that in the coming days, we will not survive without personal revelation. So that's why, I could read all these quotes, and I suggest you look at these things, but in the end, that's the answer, is that you'll get what you need if you ask. I promise. You'll get the motivation if you don't have it and you need it. And then would you also, Nikki, kind of just share your experience a little bit?
Yeah. Okay. So this is just real quick, I think, when you're talking about, it says, for decades the Lord's prophets have urged us to store food, water, and financial reserves for a time of need. The current pandemic has reinforced the wisdom of that counsel. I urge you to take steps to be temporally prepared, but I'm even more concerned about your spiritual and emotional preparation. And on top of that, one of the first talks it was the first talk of conference the last time, and Elder Bednar came out, and his talk was on preparedness, and he said, people ask all the time, why are the prophets no longer talking about it? And he said, you need to know, you need to do this. So, and that was kind of how they kicked off conflict. So if something were to happen, and you are in a state of gratitude versus fear, it makes all the difference. And now you're looking ahead instead of trying to work behind and get back. So anyway, just wanted to share that and hope that motivates a little bit.
Thank you. All right, Alex, you spun us way off here. No, that's a really good question. And it's funny because when I thought on the ways to go with this, one way was right down that path for a long time, to talk about a lot of stuff. And there is a lot of stuff. But what ended up feeling right was just the invitation to ask. Just ask. And that seems simplistic, but listen to this, you're already here, and then think about what stands out, and then just ask what's right for you to do as a family. And for me, my house has a lot more grain in it than it did 6 months ago. That is a drop in the bucket to how I've learned to work with the Lord. I just had things come to me that I feel were really, were clearly from Him. So, guideposts, right? So now we're moving into like, okay, so what do I do? Right, so the church, the guideposts from the church, right, are that we store foods that are part of your normal diet. This is directly word verbatim from the church website. That are part of your normal diet in a 3-month supply. Okay, so it's 3 months of food that you would normally eat. Okay, as you develop a longer-term storage that focus on food staples such as wheat, rice, pasta, oats, beans, and potatoes that can last for 30 years or more. So the celestial food storage was a joke when we were talking about like a base, right? You see in front of you there, like that very base, bare minimum approach that really focuses on grains. So we're gonna look at and talk specifically first about grains. And the easiest way to do this in this category, for $200 to $300 with flour, which is 9 cents a serving. This is the cheapest food. This is the cheapest home storage, food storage you can have. You can have a year's supply of flour. Okay, $200 to $300 depending on your intake. And you see these calculations on this sheet here. Like a child, you're multiplying by 0.5, which would be 200 pounds of grains. And that ends up being about $150. Okay, so for $150, a child could have a year's supply of flour. And you think, well, that's pretty basic, and could you survive on your supply? Well, actually, with sourdough and what you can get there in terms of nutritional value, it's better than you think. And we're going to talk about that and make Rihanna give us a little bit of a presentation on that in a little bit here. But President, right from here, Harold B. Lee said, perhaps if we think not in terms of a year's supply, what we would ordinarily use, and think more in terms of what it would take to keep us alive in case we didn't have anything else to eat. That last would be very easy to put in storage for a year, just enough to keep us alive if we didn't have anything else to eat. We wouldn't get fat on it, but we would live. If you think of it in terms of that kind of annual storage rather than a whole year's supply of everything you're accustomed to eat, which in most cases is utterly impossible for the average family, I think we will come nearer to what President Clark advised way back in 1937, which was kind of a seminal address on food storage. And you see in your handouts a whole bunch of additional prophetic guideposts relative to food storage, but this is, colloquial terms like that, base level, celestial level, inexpensive way to start. And if you were to say, financially I can't do that, and I can't do all of what we're going to talk about here, but you were to say, well, $150 a month, me setting aside, I could do this. And for the grains, one thing I neglected to say is everyone has this. If you have a phone and you hold up your camera to this phone, you'll see it opens up a Google Doc that has the prices, the best prices for all these things that we found. And the grains, it's mostly the home storage center. Okay, there's a QR code right here if you don't know that, but that's the Bishop's Storehouse. Okay, so it's a different part of the same building. That's usually the cheapest place to get those, and you can call them. You can do it online, like Jackie said, and just say, hey, I want to get 10 boxes of flour, and then Rick is done for his individual food storage, if you want to do that. Or, obviously a mix. Oats are another one that is a great one that's also inexpensive. And you can see on this QR code here what the best ones were in terms of price. Oats and flour and rice are 3 that are really cheap. When we talk about grains, one thing you really need to think about is that if things fell apart, and we lost water, fuel. If you lose access to, you can't just turn on the oven, right? Fuel is one of our biggest limiting factors. Like, you would not have unlimited fuel. And so one of the things to consider when you think about the grains and also some of the hard legumes, right, is that hard beans can take hours to cook, and they consume a lot of fuel. We have some legacy in ours, but I am acquiring no more. And it's different for everyone. You can decide what's right for you. But for me, these things can be put in, like, obviously we know flour is very easy and quick. Oats can be put in boiling water and closed up and just sat there. And similar to freeze-dried food, like we're going to talk about. And rice, the same thing. It's quick rice is quick oats. Parboiled rice and minute rice is the other one that goes a little bit quicker. But even then, even normal rice is pretty quick. So those are the three in that category that we are focusing on because of the fact that we're going to talk about fuel in another month, so don't get too worried about that. We'll talk about options and things, but just have that in the back of your head that when you're thinking about grains, think about fuel and think about how long it takes to cook some of those other grains and some of our legumes if we're going to be technical. Yes?
So, with the grains, it'd be like not 400 pounds of one thing, it'd be total.
It's a
grains,
total, yeah.
400.
Yeah, and so that's why I say this is the cheapest. So if you were just to say, like, I mean, this, a lot of what pioneers did, right? They just had a sack of flour, sack of beans, and you can get hard wheat and grind it, right? You can do that. There's a grinder there that Jackie brought. But I'm just trying to be as simple as possible. Like, this is better than nothing, or a combination of those three. And I agree, my rice was so varied I couldn't pull it out. But would be a very simple combination that would be very easy to cook and very inexpensive, okay? Grains, right? With that one caution, remembering about fuel when you choose what grains you get. And the source, and you'll see it on your, the Bishop's Storehouse is where I recommend one-stop shopping for grains. Okay, you can just set that up and go with it. Okay, moving into vegetables. Probably, these are kind of set up as the most important, right? That's your base, that's where you start, make sure you have it. Vegetables are obviously very important as well. They used to be a lot harder than they are now because of freeze drying. And that doesn't mean, I'm not saying only if you buy a freeze dryer. You can, we've looked at a lot of different places and found prices between 50 cents a serving and $1 a serving, which is good still for vegetables. Purchasing number 10 cans, and this QR code that's on here, click that and you'll see that you look at beans on that list. You see that carrots is on that list, corn, peas, spinach, mashed potatoes, and refried beans. Which refried beans are great because they're easy. You get the benefit of pinto beans without the super long cook and the fuel consumption, right? So those are the ones that are on there, and there's a link to each one of them. A good price. I mean, it's not magical, there may be a better price, but are a little bit nerdy in researching. That's one of the things that I think is the reason that the Lord wrote me into this, because I like to do that. And we all kind of look at some of these things, and you'll see good prices for these things. Okay, so look at that. Consider what might be good for you. Peas are extremely high in nutritional value, as is spinach. And there's a link to the best or a good price for each one of those. What we saw mostly that was that Augustin, Nutri-Store, and Emergency Essentials typically had the best prices. And a lot of these are on Amazon. You click that hyperlink, it'll just take you to Amazon, and you can just buy cans right there. Okay, so that's that category. A half step before getting into meat is fruit. Fruit is pretty expensive, freeze-dried. Apple slices sometimes are available at the Bishop's Storehouse, at the Home Storage Center. Sometimes they're not. It's great to have them. Not essential. It's not one of the base things you see on that list. Fresh fruit, though, is something to consider. If there was, I'm not going to name a calamity because then everyone starts thinking about calamity, but if we lost services and we lost water, your garden would die in a week, unfortunately. So like we talk about storing seeds and things like that, that's great. Like I always say the Lord loves treks, and maybe at some point you're trekking. But in the short term, if you are staying in place and you're in your home, I think that a garden is probably not the main thing to focus on. Which, great to have seeds. Great. I love gardening. I mean, I'm one of the nerdier ones in the neighborhood, and I have a big garden. But I've not felt like that's the way to go. Fruit trees, on the other hand, if things fell apart and you had fruit trees that had fruit on them, even right now, fruit trees are able to survive a lot longer and still give you fruit. And so I think it makes sense to have fruit. And then fruit can be sun-dried and it can last a year. So having some fruit trees, and we've been counseled, if you look back and you'll see Prophet's Counsel having fruit trees particularly, I think it's a good idea. Okay, I'm going to try to move through this quickly, and we're going to get to a couple people who are going to show us some things here. Meat, not an essential. This is not something you have to have. It's great to have. And frankly, this is a little bit funny, but this right here is probably like a bar of gold if things were bad and money lost its value. Meat obviously is great in protein, but it's hard to store, right? So some of the options for meat are tuna cans can give you 3 years. That's not bad for meat. You can get 3 years out of that. And a newer thing that's out there are these aluminum sealed packets. And this one's tuna, but there's chicken now, there's pork, there's a lot of these that can last 2 years. And so that's kind of another one that is something to consider, something to think about. Obviously, the other category is a freeze dryer. And that's what these were all preserved with. You see turkey here, ground beef, ham steaks. There's at least 5 or 6, maybe 7, at least 6 I think in the neighborhood right now. People that have these, they're extremely expensive. Between $2,000 and $5,000 for one of those. And so it's like something to think about, well, not the first place to start probably, right? But it's something that is there, and it makes meat a lot less expensive. We ran one. Joe was out of town, so we broke into his house right when he got his, and 50 times since then. But the first time that I broke into his house and ran his, set it up for him. I mean, it was really nice of me. But then ran it in a week. I got enough food for our family to have meat once a week for a year. So I mean, you catch up, right? And so like our family we got one, and we're passing it around our family. It's different. We live in different parts of the state, but.
When do you leave in town, Joe?
All the time.
So I have his garage code, and it can't be bought. All right. Okay, so moving on now miscellaneous, right? So Jackie mentioned oils, and oils are tough, right? And Jackie talked about about olive oil, which is one of the better ones in that category. Cooking oil in general is kind of a tough thing. When you think about it, olive oil can last 3 years. There was a study that I just saw recently that coconut oil was found to last 7 years if it was kept cool, dark, and obviously sealed.
It's also quite tasty.
It's quite tasty.
What's
It's
tasty?
better for
Coconut
cooking
oil.
at higher temperatures.
Yeah, no, coconut oil is great. And you'll see some others on this list here. There's not just links in this QR code. There's also information about each of these. And as it relates to oil, Crisco lasts 5 years. Peanut oil lasts 3 to 4 years. Powdered butter, which this is 200 servings, and there's a link to this.
You can't actually
Last
cook with that.
10 years. I know it's not the same
Yeah,
type of thing,
powdered
but
milk.
it's butter.
Yeah, it's flavored.
But it's flavoring. It's not
Yeah.
for the oil component, right?
Yeah.
What is it?
What is what?
What is it? It's not butter, what is it?
No, it is butter. It is butter. That's why I want to clarify. But it is not. It's not.
Butter, not the fat. You
It's
can't cook with butter, you
cream,
can't
water,
fry
salt,
it.
non-fat milk, vitamin E, vitamin C. It's for soups, mashed potatoes. We're all gonna be having popcorn when things fall apart, so that's important. On vegetables, yeah, it's mostly for the flavor part.
Yeah, it's
so. That's a good point.
that's all it is. Don't
But
expect to
butter.
cook with it.
I like butterfly.
I know,
It's actually pretty cheap, really, to get one of these. Okay, other miscellaneous things, milk, right? Obviously important. There's a link there to milk. And, is that it there?
Matt, can I ask a question?
Yes.
On the meat,
Yes.
so what, you take the steak and you bring it down to a piece of jerky, is that what it looks like?
Oh, actually, thank you for that, because I'm gonna stop right here and make Joe come up to show us how to reconstitute freeze-dried food, and meat is one of those, so you were inspired to do that.
So I just did this rotisserie chicken. I just grabbed it from Costco. I found that it's a lot better if you don't have to cook it. I got all excited about smoking a bunch of stuff and then freeze drying it, and I found out that pre-cooked stuff from Costco is more enjoyable. So that's what this is.
Is your
and
snake in there too?
there might be.
It could be. It's loose.
Yeah, it is loose. So we may
I
not
hope
have
you know how
snake
much that
fingers.
hurt him to open that up.
That's not in here. That's good. So it's just so I just pulled apart the rotisserie chicken. So I mean that's all it is. And then what we do, I didn't add any flavor or anything to it. I just threw it right in.
Pass like a right piece.
Well,
Yeah.
oh yeah. And then when we're done, everyone's gonna be able to try this too. And I just say that this is not just important if you're getting a freeze dryer, because it's the same process that you would use for these. That if you're buying these number 10 cans,
Yeah.
it's the same thing.
And then what I do is I'm just gonna pour. This is just some hot water that we have, and you just pour it in here until it gets.
And when we don't have the electric version, this is another month and we'll talk about this, but super easy to boil water pretty quick, and that's it, something like that you would maybe use this electric.
And then I'll just let it sit here for a little bit, and you'll be able to try it out. See what you think. The reason why I was sold on this chicken is I went over to Matt's house and I tried some, and my kids didn't know it was freeze dried, and so he just took it out of the cup of water and put it on the counter, and I tried it. I was like, oh, this tastes good, and the kids walked by, grabbed a bite, and then as they were leaving, then they came back and finished it. And they're like, oh, this is so good, Dad. I want to see this. And I was like, all right, man, I'm sold. The kids don't notice the difference. It'll be great. So yeah, no, I mean, this has been really good. We've done a ton of stuff, and I would say also, Matt was using it, but I would love a lot of people to use it. We got a big one. I mean, we got the one that doesn't have some of them we have to change oil all the time, so we didn't do that. So Dolores is taking me up on the offer to use it sometimes. She'll bring over just a bunch of food and I'll freeze dry it for her. And I would love to do that for more people. It was a big investment, and if I could have a ton of neighbors using it all the time, it would make it worth a lot more for me. So please take me up on that offer. I would love to freeze dry a bunch of food for people.
His rates are really
Try
good too.
anything, or is it like certain things?
I
You can
think
freeze
only,
dry
Ice cream
almost
sandwiches.
anything.
yeah, I have ice cream sandwiches. We do candy. We have chocolate milk. Chocolate milk was really good. It tasted just like. It was actually really good.
Things that are high fat or predominantly water, like cucumber, don't freeze dry well. But you can.
Yeah.
Even
can
watermelon, you
grapes
can.
are
You
great.
can do
It
it,
just
if
tastes
it's got, like watermelon
tastes like
tastes
candy, you know.
fine, it's just, it's same thing, but cucumber, what you're tasting is water, so you're not gonna get much out of it, but if it's high fat,
That's how
it's
cucumber
not gonna
tastes
store very
normally.
well.
Yeah, the high
Because
fat's a
fats
little
don't
bit.
store well.
Right.
Yeah.
Was there-
It'll just
Jen,
oh yeah.
I was just gonna say high fat content doesn't normally
Yeah.
do well
Yeah.
in freeze
Those
dryer.
are tougher. We need some more water just to keep those ones going too. And then, so when we're done, these will be ready. Take just 5 minutes there. When we're done, you'll come and try these.
Joe, what was the ratio of with the chicken and water? Is it like half and half type of thing?
I think you just have to cover it.
You just cover it?
You just have to cover it and it'll sit in there, and then it just reconstitutes. And you can do eggs. You can do
Yeah, all kinds of stuff.
yeah. It's pretty crazy.
And so remember though that this is not just relevant if you splurge on that, because vegetables, which are more important than meat, frankly, in terms of like a base, that's really the way to go with them, and it's the same thing. These peas, beans, the same thing. You put hot water in them, reconstitute them, and my kids, we eat them camping all the time. I mean, not just vegetables, but they love it. They really, really like the freeze-dried food reconstituted.
Does water have to be hot? Or can
It doesn't, and sometimes with breads, because you think of like pouring that into a bread to reconstitute, they'll wrap it in a damp paper towel, and it doesn't necessarily have to be hot, but it does it better with hot.
Just warm.
Yeah, we actually like boiling. It does it really, really well, but like again, fuel is always, and we're going to talk about, like I said, another month, but fuel is something to think about there. Okay. So thank you, Joe, and then I guess, yeah, someone filling that back up for us.
Yeah.
So we can get those ones going. So we're gonna have that to try as we go down. And then, so we talked about milk, eggs are another one, freeze-dried again, these are all freeze-dried. I know I have eggs in there. Okay, these are whole eggs, 72 servings right here, and not very much. You'll see the link to that if you wanna look at that. A very good thing to have on hand. And that's what most of the things you'll see here are like kind of the more important things to have. And then sugar, it's recommended that everyone has 40 pounds, every adult 40 pounds of sugar. Like, you probably do 80 now, but 40 pounds of sugar, this is 35 pounds of sugar right here. I mean, this is how strong I am, it's full. We have one that's empty, the other ones of ours are full, but I left this one empty just for you guys. This is, there's a link to this. This is just, all you need is to see that rubber gasket in here. This creates a seal that will make sugar, which we just bought from Walmart in the bags, poured it in here. This is a $7 lid on a, which comes with this part too, on just a normal 5-gallon bucket. And,
It's food grade bucket.
what's that?
It's a food grade.
It is a food grade bucket, I'm sorry, yes. Which I think we have a link to that too. But that will last years and years and years, 25 years plus, if you keep it dry. So super easy, super cheap way to do it. You can also buy them in cans, but you don't have to.
Is that the same for flour? Can we do the same thing for flour?
You can, it won't last as long. But even this doesn't last as long. Flour lasts 10 years. And this is so cheap that we just have done it this way. But that's a possibility. The other thing you can do that way is salt. Okay, so salt's the other category. Did you hand me that, Brandon? That's salt. There. So this is just Himalayan pink salt from Costco, and this one, make sure I get this right, was $6 for 5 pounds. Okay, and it's recommended that each adult has 8 pounds per person per year. So like one of these per kid, and you're good to go, right? You set that in your food storage, 1 per kid, maybe 3 for 2 adults, and you're good to go. You can go more than that, but it's not as difficult as you think. One caveat to that, you'll see information in this sheet about it, is that iodized salt is not as easy to store. It will cake. And so you can have it and store it for a shorter period of time. I've read that if you put it in a Mylar bag and you seal it well, that you can get as many as 10 years of iodized. But this is like indefinite. As long as there's not any exposure to the M word. We don't say moisture in our house. It doesn't like that word. But if it's not exposed to wet, then it can last a real long time. We all have our words, right? Okay, so you see a couple others here. You'll see links to those options there. I didn't say, I guess, sugar was 35, and I guess I did say 35 in a 5-gallon bucket, 40 pounds per year per adult. So like we kind of basically just have one of these per person in our family, and we're done with sugar. Set it aside and move on to the next thing. Like I said, this is an event for me. This is not a way of life. As soon as I got it set, I'm going back to fishing or whatever the Lord wants me to do next. But Craig is going to talk to us about a milk alternative that is really versatile too. Yeah.
Yeah. So as Matt mentioned at the beginning of this, we all kind of have like what's good for our families. Okay, well, you're gonna have to point over there in a second. It's over here.
Sorry.
But anyway, so for our family, we're dairy free. So we don't do any dairy, and so we're always drinking coconut milk and almond milk and, you know, all the different alternatives, right? And I know that many of you are as well, just from knowing you. So one of the products that I found I wanted to share just as an option, because we talk about like dehydrated milk and all those things for someone that can take milk, but what do you do for like a long-term source for someone that can't do milk, right? And so I found this product, and I'll hold it up here so you can see it. It's called the Almond Cow, and it's basically, it makes milk out of pretty much anything. So think almonds, coconut shards, cashews, whole grains, like you name it. It makes milk, and it takes about 30 seconds. You just follow the little recipe in here, and it makes. And I know a lot of you can't see this, but there's a, you can come up after and look at this. So this is a little recipe book that comes with it, and I actually made some so you can try it, but this is what I made, almond milk. And for this one specifically, it basically takes a cup of almonds, all right? It takes a little bit of salt, a little bit of vanilla, and then either a few dates or some syrup. And in my opinion, it tastes just like the stuff you buy at the store, right? Yeah. And then there's all sorts of different recipes in here. I'm not going to take a ton of time to do it, but like coconut milk, you can do cashew milk, you can do a mixture on that one. They even have like, you can add like cinnamon, macadamian, soy, chocolate milk, strawberry milk. I mean, there's all these different varieties. And then the other cool thing about this is that when you make the milk, you have pulp left over. So this right here is some pulp from the almonds that I just love there. And you can try some of this too. It's actually really good. My kids love to eat that, especially when I make strawberry milk. Or, you know, the other things are like, oh, this tastes amazing. There's some spoons up here you can try, but there's a whole other section in the back that talks about what you can do with the pulp. So you can make you can make pancakes with the pulp. You can make like cookies and things with the milk. Little donut balls. I mean, anyway, there's all these different options. Hummus, like there's always different options. But anyways, I don't want to take forever on this, but the point is there are options. And then as far as like long-term storage for like the consumables that you would need, like almonds and nuts and things like that, you can get, you know, bags of nuts and freeze them, and that will extend their life. Like I got a 25-pound box of almonds for about $125 in Alpine storage, which I think's been mentioned. I get a bunch of stuff there, but that's an option as well. Put that in your freezer; it'll last a long time, and then you have months and months of milk, right? Depending on how many kids you have or whatever. But I got a lot of kids, so. But anyway, so that's that. I think that's it. There's a little code, just a QR code to scan, and then just so everybody can see, like this half cup. Sorry, this is 1 cup of almonds made that much milk. So, right? I mean, you put water in there, and then those items that I said, and then it's basically just push the button and go from there. And then, like I said, you can scan this code. It'll take you to the product page. And I'm not getting paid for this. It's just be nice. It's just one of those things that I found where I'm just like, that's pretty cool, right? And then we actually use it all the time just to make the treats and stuff with it as well. And they're around $200, so that they're a little bit pricey, but you can do a lot with it, and they're pretty nice. So anyway, that's it. I'll shut up now, but yeah. Anything else? Anything else?
Where did you get it? Just like
I just got it online. Yeah, scan this QR code.
It's not on Amazon, visible, but if you go to their site,
Yeah.
Almond Cow.
Yeah, just like almondcow.com,
Yeah, so
I think.
most of the stuff we talked about, there is a link directly to it, and
Yeah.
you can pull it up. And Craig's gonna have samples afterwards.
Yeah, I already samples right here. I'll make some.
Yeah, we're all
If you guys want,
excited about that.
we'll make some afterwards, yeah. I was gonna say something else I forgot. Oh, they have like little promotional offers every once in a while where you can get like, you know, like they'll throw in a couple of these and then like a little cleaning thing and like the recipe book, and like just depending on like when it is, you can get little promotional. So anyway, that's it. Yeah, any other questions?
Can you freeze dry that milk, like if you want
I'm sure you can, like, yeah. You freeze dry everything, right? If you can freeze dry that kind of dairy milk, I'm sure you can freeze dry this kind of milk, yeah.
Or you can maybe can it, like put it in a jar.
Yeah. Yeah, just depends on shelf
You
life.
can rent counters from the, I think the Bishop Storehouse. You can go borrow the,
Like pressure
yeah,
canners.
and seal it, so.
Okay, so to wrap up here, don't want to keep everyone long, we're gonna talk about, at the very end here, just like, okay, so what do I do and what resources we can be looking for, but we started with flour, so it's gonna end with the flour. It really is a basic, simple thing that if you don't have a lot of it, I was just getting a lot of it. And I wanna ask, can you kind of talk to us a little bit about what cool stuff you can do that's a lot more healthy than just standard flour on its own?
Yeah, I started making sourdough, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, and all triggered from watching the Netflix documentary Cooked by Michael Pollan. I don't know if anyone's seen it. One of the episodes is called Air, and it talks all about natural yeast, and just historically how that is how people have made bread for thousands of years, and it's like the proper way to make bread, and it's easy. It only has 3 ingredients: flour, salt, water. And that's how you make your yeast, is with flour and water. Does anyone have a starter? I know we have a couple of bakers in here. So during COVID, I know people were, like my sister was scrambling to find yeast, and we couldn't find it anywhere on the shelves. Everyone was baking and stuff. And so it was funny, because like it hadn't even crossed my mind, because I have my starter, and it's just, I feed it, every couple days
I
or
have
whatever.
pets, I understand that.
Yeah, it is my pet. I forgot to bring it. I was going to bring it. But anyway, so like it wasn't even a thought in my mind. Like, how am I going to make bread? Because I've got my starter. I'm good to go. Like, I will be making bread. And in fact, during COVID, I started baking every day just because it was something to do. And it was just something fun to do with my kids to serve. I'd make a couple loaves and we'd go pass them off to friends and stuff. And each loaf. Now this is like more artisan. You don't have to make artisan bread with a starter. You can make any type of bread. But like one of these loaves, it's about 17 cents if you like, in terms of the amount of flour, water, salt. Like it's so cheap to make. I get the big bags of Lehigh Roller Mills bread flour, and I use a little whole wheat flour. And so yeah, I usually make 2 or 3 loaves at a time. The only thing with sourdough is that it takes time, and which we all had during, well, not everyone, but I had a lot of time during COVID. So it's like I think that's why a lot of people started doing sourdough, because you were home and you're able to go through the motions of mixing it together, folding it. People are kind of turned off to sourdough because it's, one loaf takes about 24 hours, but that doesn't mean you're like busy the whole time. You're letting it sit in a bowl, you're letting it rise, you're putting it in your fridge, whatever. There's a few steps along the way. But you really don't do a lot of work. The yeast does most of the work for you. And in terms of nutrition, in that documentary, they talk about how like a whole grain, like if you take the actual grain and eat it, you're not gonna get really any nutritional value out of it. You'll absorb some calories from it. You might get a little something from it. You grind it into flour. You eat a bite of flour, it's going to go through, and you might absorb a little bit more in terms of nutrition, but you're really not getting the full benefit of that grain. By using that wild natural yeast and giving it that full 24 hours, the yeast breaks down all of the tough components in the grain and unlocks all the nutrients. There's protein, there's basically everything you need to survive is in whole grain. We don't really get the benefit of it because processed bread is made quick.
I'll also say, I don't know if you're gonna say this, but people who have gluten allergies, that fermentation process.
Yeah, I make this bread for a lot of our friends that have gluten allergies, and they are fine with it.
So do I, same thing.
Yeah.
Gluten intolerant people do
Well,
that.
in the 50s, when they started making that fast, active, rapid yeast, is when a lot of these gastrointestinal issues started. That whole grain is really hard on our gut, and so some people have easier time with it, some don't. But overall, it was then that people started having more issues with their gut. So anyway, the yeast has done all the hard parts of digestion for you. So what you have is a very easily digestible bread, and it tastes good, and it looks pretty, and it's easy to make, and it's cheap. So it's if you have the patience to try and figure out, you know, the steps are quite easy. You just have to learn it. And after that, like I've been baking for a long time, I don't even have to think about it anymore. It's not hard. But yeah.
Don't you have some instructions online somewhere?
Yeah, I have an instruction sheet. I do a class every so often, and I have a sheet with pretty easy instructions. And I don't know.
We'll add it to chef.live.
Okay.
So were you the one that taught all the Relief Society? So I want to thank you personally. Because we have sourdough all the time now.
That's how it should be. Once you get baking, you kind of just get addicted to it. This book has really good instructions too. This is like basically my instructions. This has photos along the way, so you kind of follow along. A couple of the steps still I had to like look on YouTube, so I'm like, I don't think I'm doing this right. You can find anything on YouTube, show you like the methods. But anyway, I would recommend everyone at least, and there are enough people in the neighborhood with starters that if you kill it, or if we're in need of, you know, we've got a lot of starters in the neighborhood, so we should be good. Does anyone have any questions about?
So afterwards, yeah. Okay, we're wrapping up here, I promise. Nikki, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just real quick, okay. If you have any questions or want like additional like in-depth help, here's our numbers. Jackie will put hers on there. Like Joe's saying, he's got a freeze dryer, he's willing to use it. There's like 6 in the neighborhood. Most people probably will. I have one I'm willing to share. So also we have literally, you pray, the Lord answers. That really is the point of all this. I have learned so much of how to hear the Lord, and we really have a surplus of food coming in to run on these freeze dryers as well. So there should not, if you are struggling or worried, please talk to the bishop. There should not be any reason that we cannot get you, or just I can give food to Joe to run for you. So at least at the time being. So there should be no excuse here. And the other thing was also on top, oh yeah, okay, I'll let you talk about that in a minute. If you do want more individualized personal help, if you're not gonna get all the questions answered, we have been doing like dinner nights at my house where we'll invite 1 or 2 people to come over and go, and we kind of get everybody's questions and answers figured out. If anybody's interested in that, please text us. I'll make food, dinner, come over. If you just want to come over for a barbecue, just so you know that we're willing to do everything and anything you need to do. There should be no excuses here. When the Lord says, did you have it? We washed our feet of this. So.
We're not going to end on that. So one thing, which is great, it has been interesting to see things just pop up, opportunities pop up. This is just one example. Okay. You know what this is? This is provided by Alpine School District. All of a sudden they announced that every week they're doing a pickup for any children, it doesn't matter the age, a week of food. And we did this the first week, just kind of curious to what it was, thinking it would be perishables. Most of this stuff lasts 2 years, a year to 2 years. We've been doing it every week since, and we've been encouraging people to do it. I think there's maybe a reason that it popped up. If you did this through the summer, you'd have a 2-month supply of food for your kids.
Let's address, this isn't for just needy families. This is a
This is
surplus
not for
of
needy
COVID money that they are just saying we need to use it.
Just an example,
Yeah, it's a national.
right? People who are volunteering at the food bank, food that is surplus, that is just going to go to waste otherwise, they give it to people. That's been coming in and going into freeze dryers in the neighborhood and being used by people. Did you have a question?
Sorry, what was the box again? I kind of missed it.
This is Alpine School District. There's pickup locations. Feel free to ask Jamie, Jefferson, or Nikki about where those are. Every week, there's for anyone who has kids that don't have to go into school, but just kids in the boundaries, you can pick one up for each child every week. And it's a week of food. And so if you do that for 2 months, 2 to 3 months over the summer, you would actually have close to the 3-month supply of food that you normally eat that is what is recommended by the church. And so, as we wrap up, like, the thing I'd say is that if I hope you're not overwhelmed. I hope you think about this and you think that, this is where I feel like I should start. This is a real easy one if you're nowhere and you just want to call and just get some boxes going. Looking at those links, you can just start going on those links and getting some things. There is this company that we reference really is a good guy that does it. He's not making a lot of doing it, but he can get these at the exact same price as if you bought them online for you, delivered you can set up a monthly plan and say, hey, I have $200 a month I want to spend. For my inventory, what were the things that were highest on my list? And he'll just do that for 6 months if you wanted to do that. The highest things that he would suggest to you to get, and it's the same price if you bought it online, because he gets it at a discounted rate, right? Obviously, that's how he's making that work. But that's an automated way to do this. If everything else is just too overwhelming logistically, if it's financial, then that's a place to start. And then I just say a quote that President Oaks recently gave: "When you get an impression, act on it. However unusual it seems, or however inadequate you feel following it. You may not know the reason, but blessings will follow to you and to someone else if you hear him." And there's hear him again, right? A lot of what our current prophet's been telling us is to hear him. And I really do think that the answer is personal, and for each and every one of us it's something different. If you heard something today, I would just start there. If you need help, please reach out to us, and we're here to help. And I say that in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.